Please pray with me. Lord, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say, and please keep me out of your way. Amen. Please be seated. Advent was all about Mary with a large supporting cast. The angel Gabriel right over here, her cousin Elizabeth, Elizabeth's son to be John the Baptist, a few shepherds sprinkled in for good measure, and oh yeah, this little baby Jesus makes a very silent but important appearance too. And then we move to Epiphany in just a couple of weeks, and we get the Magi are the three kings or the three wise men. Pick whatever name you want. But wait a minute. I jumped ahead and I left somebody out, didn't I? Someone critical to the birth story of Jesus, and without this person, Jesus would not have survived those first critical few years. Who could that be? Joseph. Good old Joseph. Soon to be stepdad Joseph, if you will. There are all kinds of stepdads out there, you know. Good ones, bad ones, not very involved ones that forget the step part in their life and they just act like dad. And then there's Joseph. Joseph, you see, is the poster boy for great stepdads. Joseph, in my opinion, doesn't get near enough airtime in the Gospels. And we know so very little about him. Everything we do know comes from just two Gospels, Matthew and Luke. He was older than Mary, probably widowed, with children from his first marriage. He was a carpenter by trade, and ultimately he would teach Jesus this craft. He was a devout Jew. The last story we hear of Joseph is when he leads his family on the annual trip to the temple for Passover when Jesus is 12, something Jesus continued to do throughout his life. Yes, Joseph was a good role model as well. But he was so much more than that. He was first and foremost, as I said earlier, a protector. Now let's start at the beginning. Joseph is engaged to Mary. A long process in the ancient world that would have had families coming together to make a match. She comes to him, this young woman, with a fantastical story, truly one of a kind. My daughter used to say, it's the best story a girl in trouble has ever made up. She's carrying God's baby, no less. Joseph does care for Mary and doesn't want to see her to receive the punishment that would have been handed out to a young, unmarried woman of her day who was pregnant. The Old Testament spelled out the sentence for such, and the punishment was death by stoning. But if Joseph ended the engagement quietly and Mary was sent away, perhaps to a distant village to give birth with family members, maybe, just maybe, she would have survived. Joseph is a righteous man, and he plans to act in mercy where Mary is concerned. And that's what he has just decided to do. And then we have the dreams, a whole series of them, real dreams. An angel of the Lord comes in these dreams to Joseph, first to tell him that he should indeed marry Mary. Then the child is born, and many more miraculous things happen. Shepherds show up with this unbelievable tale of angels in the sky, singing and announcing the birth of the Messiah, his stepson. Then, sometime later, there's this visit from the Magi, also telling great stories about his stepson. And then, this dream today, the one that we have here that warns him of danger for a totally vulnerable newborn and his mother. This coming dream tells Joseph that he's got to get out of town. He's got to protect his new family. The evidence begins to mount in Joseph's mind. He will ultimately do what the angel tells him to do. He will gather this young family and he will flee to Egypt. He will cross the border in desperation to save his child's life. After all, King Herod will hear that a new king has been born, and he will feel threatened by this child, and he will slaughter others in his path to finding Jesus. It's frightening and it's dramatic, but Joseph took action. He stood up for this child that was not his. He went out of his way. He put his life on the line to get Mary and this baby out of harm's way. He steps up big time. What a stepdad he is. He must have had moments of disbelief. He probably thought that he couldn't do it. He wouldn't be up to the task. Or maybe he just thought he was imagining that God was calling him to a task. I've had that same feeling many times when I've woken up from a dream or seen a vision. But at some point, God broke through and he grabbed Joseph's attention. It's like that, yes, I'm talking to you moment. This is another example of how God's plan has been achieved in unanticipated and irregular ways. And just what is Joseph's story telling us today? Besides, of course, what an awesome stepdad Joseph is. Well, for me, he represents the best of all of us. Just an average Joe, so to speak. People of faith, people who show up for worship and know who their Lord is. People with thoughts, people with dreams. People who might be getting an idea in their head that God is calling them to something. I bet you saw that coming, didn't you? Are you thinking to yourself that God just might be calling you to something? Well, yes, without a doubt. God is calling you and me and everyone to something. The question is, are we listening? Perhaps God is calling you to grow this church here. He's calling you to invite friends and family with you to sit in these pews, to hear His word, to serve in this community. No doubt He is calling you to support this church with your pledges, with your time, and with your abilities. God might be calling you to more regular worship in the new year. He might be calling you to join one of our current ministries. The thrift shop and the Saturday breakfast are always looking for more hands to help them. He might be calling you to teach Sunday school class or join the altar guild or to step up as an usher or a healing hands minister. Listen for that quiet voice in your head and in your heart. And for sure, in this time of transition, He is calling you to stay faithful, grab an oar, and help move Christ Church into the future that God has for you here. Yes, you. I'm talking to you. You can look over your shoulder now and wonder if God is really calling that person in the pew behind you to do this work. Or you can be like Joseph and you can with some trepidation, say, "Yes, Lord, what would you have me do?" And I leave you today with what the angel said to Joseph. I say to you today, do not be afraid, for your Lord has great and wondrous plans for each and every one of you. Amen.